Bienvenidos, and welcome to my channel. I've been a fan of D&D for a very long time, and beyond the very cool dice, great storytelling, and imaginary worlds, I fell in love with the miniatures. I painted my first minis around that time, and have been painting them ever since. So follow along with my channel, and see if this old dog gamer can learn some new tricks. Episode 42, Dragonlance, the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. Just kidding. Episode 42, The End of the Ending Concludes. This episode, I finished working on the Ghost Dragon from Cripple God Foundry, which I am using as my Greater Death Dragon. That battle is still weeks away, but I finished the mini and I wanted to show it off. I resumed the coverage of my first attempt at painting the Purple Flames. I decided I wasn't liking the way I had originally done things, so I switched it up and decided to use the dark purple base and the Kraken lavender highlights as a Zenithal-ish base coat. Now, I've talked a lot about my history in gaming on this channel, but there's one topic I have not discussed, and normally I won't even bring it up. But in light of the new D&D rules being released and dissected all over the internet, there's another edition, a lost edition if you will, that should get some time in the spotlight. That's right, I'm talking about 4th edition. Dun dun dun! That's right, I'm going to talk about the edition we love to hate, huh? Now, I can't totally shit on 4E, because there are some good things to come out of it that did actually make it into 5E, so it can't be all bad, can it? In 2007, they introduced D&D 4th Edition at Gen Con with a huge response. The proposed changes and tools looked amazing, faster playtime, simplified rules and mechanics, not to mention getting a new player's handbook, Dungeon Master Guide, and Monster Manual every year with more features. Sounds amazing, right? My current gaming group at the time went to Gen Con that year, saw the presentation, and tried the demo of the game. They raved about it, how much easier it was to play, things felt balanced. They said it was so amazing they never wanted to play 3rd edition again. Yep, they came back from Gen Con and swore off D&D entirely until 4th edition was released. Well, flabbergasted, I parted ways with that group and found another 3rd edition group who still wanted to play D&D. Well, time went by, and lo and behold, the 4th edition release schedule had begun, and I had become more and more impressed with every little nugget they threw at us. Yeah, at first, anyway. I was looking forward to the core books and waited impatiently for them to be available. Once the player's handbook hit, I was at my friendly local game store the same day to pick it up. I read and reread the rulebook and appreciated all the updated rules. First thing I noticed was the mechanics felt equalized, each class fulfilling a specific role in combat. I was surprised to find some races and classes I would consider staples of D&D were flat out missing. But I guess if you're going to keep pumping out books every year, you need to hold back a few goodies to keep people buying them. I love the reconstruction of spells. Reusable cantrips has been the best thing to come out of 4th edition, and I'm glad to see them still in use in 5e. Enjoy the fighter ability Second Wind. You can thank 4e for that. It's some of the examples of how they stopped thinking like a corporation and started thinking like a game company again, as short-lived as it was. Once I had my hands on the DMG and Monster Manual, I saw how much the simplifications of the rules were. Being a DM was the easiest it had ever been. I also picked up the first released adventure and set out to find a 4e group. My 3rd edition group had just finished up the adventure that I had planned, and they were not interested in switching to 4th edition. quick note up on the friendly local game store bulletin board, and I had a group. One of the new players was my son. After looking over my player's handbook, he wanted to join my game, and of course I would love having him as part of it. I had tried to teach him 3rd edition, but it was such a complex rule set that it didn't stick with him at the time. Now my weekly group has changed over the years. Players come and go with life, but my son has always been there, and I don't ever want that to change. My father and I didn't bond over too many things when I was younger. He was a sports fan. I was a Star Wars fan. Not a lot of shared moments. I'm sure my dad wished I was into sports on the same level as I wished he was into Star Wars, but there you go. I'm thankful my son and I got to find commonality in nerddom. We've continued to spend time together doing something we both love. Now, don't get me wrong, my dad and I did find something to bond over many years later. When he was a young man, during the early 60s, he used to race cars at the Chico Silver Dollar Speedway. He would tell me stories about his racing days, the time he broke his neck and didn't know it during a rollover, the time he lost an entire wheel and had to replace a window of the car dealership across the street. Yeah, good times. While I may have been a nerd, I did love cars. The faster, the better. Once I learned to drive, I was tearing across town like a maniac. I got 4 speeding tickets in just under 3 years. Not something I recommend trying. Thankfully, I mellowed out before buying a practically brand new, bright red 1988 Rally Sport Camaro. I named her Christine. Needless to say, once I was in my 20s, I had discovered racing, both locally and NASCAR. Hey, my son's middle name was taken from my favorite driver, so there. Finally, there was something we could bond over, and it was a great feeling. After covering the flames, I did a medium dry brush with crack and lavender to bring back up the details. After the paint and dry brush were complete, I hit the flames with purple tone Quickshade. I chose my older version of Quickshade as it looked a little bit darker than the current version. Back on topic, shall we? Everything was smooth sailing with 4th edition. Adventures were well done, easy to run, and they came with battle maps. Having such a large collection of minis came in handy for 4E, as the game focus was now on the minis and the maps. Looking back, it's clear to see that it was a tabletop skirmish game with storytelling in between. I remember volunteering at my friendly local game store on D&D game days just to run the WotC-provided game, complete with minis. It was nice. I run the game for potential players and get to keep the adventure, minis, and maps. After a few years of playing 4th edition, my son decided to try his hand at being a DM. Around the next time, they began to release the D&D Essentials line. This was basically box sets of tokens and maps for an updated version of 4E with the errata rules written into the rulebooks. Regardless of WotC's gimmick, he felt confident enough to try and was a natural at it. He loves telling a good story, and he always fills them with his own personal Easter eggs. I watched how it helped him building his confidence, helped him with social skills and interactions, and gave him pride and joy to be the DM. His games are more and more awesome with each new session, and I continue to encourage him to tell his own story. Fourth edition started to become more transparent as to what it really was. More and more books were hitting the shelves, a set of core books every year, 2 campaign setting books and 1 campaign adventure every year, and all the extra goodie books with more spells, more monsters, more magic items, more paths to choose. It got a little bit out of control. So much was being released that the new classes looked more like reskinned versions of the core classes. New monsters were starting to seem familiar to the original ones, and so forth. Now, there was a time when Magic the Gathering was fresh on the market, and not yet under the thumb of Hasbro. WotC decided it would be a good idea to release multiple artwork versions of a card in the same set and calling it a complete set. I seem to remember opening a pack and getting only 2 commons, but 8 different versions. That was the first time I left my cards in the closet and kept my money, and I wasn't the only one. For the exposed bone on the Mini, I used a light tone quick shade from the current range, and it worked really well. For this Mini, while it is a greater death dragon, the corpse itself is more recently deceased dragon, so I didn't want the exposed bones and flesh to look too old. WotC learned from that lesson and started to give the players something worth their time and money. Unfortunately, Hasbro soon picked up WotC, who ironically rescued D&D from the collapse of TSR, and changes were afoot. This is when I first started to notice a shift in priorities. After Hasbro scooped up WotC, specifically Magic the Gathering, the books were starting to be a bit thin on the rules and parts. The last 3rd edition book was an attempt at a hybrid between what was then 3rd edition and what was becoming 4th edition, and it was just ridiculous. This same thing happened to 4th edition, only worse. After a while, the books were hard to keep up with. 1 to 3 releases a month, including the adventures. And after a while, the content of the books was way more fluff and story than actual rules. My 4th edition collection is in storage. There is actually one book I keep with the others because it has great lore from Menza Baranzan, my favorite of Underdark locations. Now, this was just talking about the 4E books falling flat. Don't forget, we were promised digital tools as well. The precursors to D&D Beyond and virtual tabletop systems were promised to be part of the 4th edition gameplay, but they were never delivered. I think they had concepts of a system for a while, but then gave up. After the bones and claws were done to my satisfaction, it was time to go over the exposed parts of the flesh. Again, I didn't want the corpse to look too old, so instead of my usual putrid type tones, I used magenta tone from the current range. This gave the fleshy bits an off-colored look that served my needs beautifully. Finally, it was time to assemble and add the dark tone quick shade to the main parts and bring the details back up, giving it some definition. Surprising even me, WotC announced the new edition with a twist. This edition will be heavily play-tested by the player community. Not some closed group of beta testers. The whole damn world! Well played, WotC, well played. For me, it seemed like the solution to all the issues. You can listen and work with your players and build something that they want to play, or listen to your investors and build something you think we need to buy. As things went on, almost everything about 5e had me hooked. Then the investors seemed to be pushing back into WotC's business, but it didn't start with D&D. I began to notice more and more Magic the Gathering sets being released outside the normal schedule, the 1 main set and 2 supplement sets, until it became practically a set a month. Where Magic the Gathering lost me was in the Secret Lair line. I was all for new special art for previous cards, but when they announced playable cards available only through Secret Lair, I was done. It was also about that time I really got back into painting, so there you go. Seeing what's happening with D&D now, stupidity over the OGL, the forced adaptation to updated rules, following the it's better to ask forgiveness than permission mentality with AI usage, laying off employees right before the holidays, bad reviews of management from the employees. Those people who actually want to make a game you would enjoy to play. All those things have led me to the point where I have no interest in any new D&D books now or in the foreseeable future. I honestly thought I would never say that after 42 years of playing Dungeons & Dragons, but here we are. final detail I added was royal purple metallic from the original line, which I used for the eyes. I'd love to share the work on that, but my hand and forehead were all that I filmed, so there it is. Can't wait to throw this down on the battlefield and watch my group take on this monstrosity. I hope you liked today's video. As always, I enjoy sharing my work with you. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any future episodes. This also helps my channel to gain exposure and hopefully build up my audience. Further ways you can support my channel are by hitting the like button so the video can gain a wider audience within the almighty algorithm. If you want to make things to the max, you can share this video or any video you've enjoyed on your social media. I depend on the community so much to help broaden my viewership. That's all for this time. Tune in next time for a little Halloween fun. And remember, they ain't gonna paint themselves.